Welcome to the mid-year and end-of-year data review training module from the Goodhue County Education District, presented by Weston Johnson. This presentation is aligned to our goal of implementing assessments within a multi-tiered system of support. The objective of this module is that you will be able to interpret mid-year and end-of-year benchmark data. This presentation will cover 4 things. First, review of data for accuracy, quick checks of data, including a check for class-wide and grade-wide problems. And second, summarize the effectiveness of supports based on 4 indicators. Third, connect the data review to our other system processes. And fourth, consider application of benchmark screening data to student-level problem solving. Okay, let's jump into our review of data. Once you first start looking, it's important to ask whether or not all students were tested. If not, additional testing should be completed to make sure all students are screened. Also, sometimes there are errors with the data. So do a quick glance to check that the students are correctly listed with their correct data and that the appropriate color coding appears. Also, when you first look at the data, you can do a quick check to see the percentage of students that are falling into each risk category, such as low risk, some risk, and high risk. If fewer than 80% of students are identified as low risk, the first step to improvement requires teams to consider what can be done to support all students. Similar to identifying that fewer than 80% of students are meeting expectations is identifying class and grade-wide problems. A class-wide problem is identified when fewer than 60% of students in a class meets expectations, or when the class median is below the benchmark target. A grade-wide problem is identified when fewer than 60% of students in a grade meet expectations, or when more than half of the classes have class-wide problems. For class-wide and grade-wide problems, teachers would implement an intervention to the entire class or grade level that targets the common skill deficits. Now we'll look into indicators that summarize effectiveness. The most specific review of effectiveness is centered on the team's current goals. Team goals are also most likely the goals that the teams are most interested in and feel like they can most likely impact during the school year. Team goals are often based on the indicators found on the following slides. When teams are reviewing their team goals, they should review assessment data as well as completion of the action steps they created to help them achieve their goals. The first summary of effectiveness indicator is our risk categories. What percentage of students are low risk, some risk, and high risk? An ideal breakdown is between 75 to 85% of students identified as low risk. 10 to 15% as some risk, and 5 to 10% as high risk. While we ideally have 90 to 95% of students meeting proficiency expectations, the 25% at some risk and high risk is tied to resource allocation. A multi-tiered system of support generally has enough resources to provide more intensive support to 25% of its population. For risk level growth, we are looking at changes across 2 testing periods. We look at the earlier testing period as the baseline. Then we want to know the change of risk category percentages in the current data. In general, we want to see low risk having more students while the higher risk category levels decrease in proportion. The next summary of effectiveness indicator is risk level transitions. While risk level growth looked at changes to the entire risk category overall, risk level transitions look at how students are moving throughout the risk categories. In general, 95% of students should stay at the low risk level across testing periods. 50 to 75% of students should decrease their risk level going from some risk to low risk. And 25% to 50% of students should decrease their risk level going from high risk to the some or low risk categories. Whether teams review absolute growth or relative growth, this summary indicator allows them to consider the learning students have made between testing periods and not just a student's level of achievement. For all summary of effectiveness indicators, teams can review subgroup data for different subgroups of their population. On this slide is just a basic example of how a visual can be set up side by side for each subgroup. This section will cover additional connections to our system processes. As our professional learning communities consider their team goals in connection to benchmark screening data, they should keep in mind the 4 essential questions used by PLCs. The benchmark screening data provides external validation to teacher-created measures. The 4 questions are: what do we want students to know and be able to do? How will we know if they learn it? How will we respond when some students do not learn? And how will we extend learning for students who are already proficient? Our PLCs are connected with a larger tiered support system. As teams interpret the data, they should share findings, share professional learning interests, and share their needs to support ongoing improvement. In this section, we'll connect benchmark data to student-level problem solving. When reviewing the effectiveness of interventions used in student problem solving, teams should consider the percentage of students making sufficient progress. Furthermore, they should review summary of effectiveness indicators for each intervention. In addition, teams will want to determine the number of student spots available for intervention, consider new students for intervention spots, regroup, adjust, change, or discontinue interventions based on data, and complete fidelity checks for interventions. In conclusion, we reviewed quick data glances, data indicators, connections to a broader system of support, and student-level problem solving. Thank you for attending this online training module. Again, I'm Weston Johnson with the Goodhue County Education District.